Hi everyone, here's Stéphane Labelle. I'm your Executive Director with Fenestration Canada. I'm joined as always today by Al Jaugelis. So Al's your Technical Director. This is episode 2 of Tech Talks. So I want to thank our sponsor Quanex Quanex, who's always supportive of us and this podcast. So we had a lot of fun at episode 1. I hope it's going to be the same today, and I hope we can keep doing these shows for a long, long time. So today, Al, I understand we have a special question of the day, which is something we want to bring to the show to generate discussions. So I'll read you the question, and maybe you can start after that to discuss with our members. So the question today is, with respect to the technical challenges facing our industry, which one concerns you the most for the coming year? So we have a couple of answers here. So we're going to start the polling right now. So you're going to see it on your screen for those who are on the call. And we ask you to answer that poll. So Al, why don't you let us know a little bit more about this question today?
Well, we recently had a public review of changes to the National Building Code. It started in January, ended in March, and some folks participated in the task group related to that. But in general, I think a lot of us are aware in the industry that the codes are changing, and sometimes there's concern about where the codes are going. Are they going too far, too fast? And so that's an area that I know some of our members are quite concerned about. Also, we have discussed in the technical committee and also with the task group at Fenestration Canada, proposed energy regulations of course, BC has had a regulation for some time. Ontario was going to update their regulation. And of course, part of the fenestration market transformation was going to be some use of provincial energy regulations as well. And then, of course, that's that fenestration market transformation program. We heard a lot about it a couple of years ago. NRCan was attending all our meetings and talking about it, and they kind of went silent last year. But we are expecting to hear more about that, and it doesn't sound like it's dropped off their radar. So I know in some conversations I've had with members this past week, they've had some concern about just what that market transformation would mean. Would it mean that they're pushing the industry too hard, too fast? And will there be a business case for it? Another issue that comes up from time to time is installation. The installer training and the installation practices in various markets. And depending where you are, it can be more or less of an issue with respect to, are there competent installers for our products? Are the installation practices in our market areas up to snuff? So there have been concerns there, and of course, some of you know Jan Eeks has been working with a couple of the colleges in Canada to do some testing on a more robust installation method for Windows. Basically, they want to test some of the ideas that have been proposed in British Columbia and elsewhere, some of the research done at at NRC regarding installation. And so he's working on that program as well. So these are some of the issues that I've heard from members about, and we're wondering to what extent these issues are on the mind of folks on our show today.
Yeah. So I wanna let you know, all our listeners today, please don't be shy, because now I see that we have a lot of answers already to the poll. So we have something to show you in the next few minutes. And then after that, we want to take your calls. So please raise your hands for those who are willing to talk with us here today. Or you can also write your questions in the Q&A. So Al, I understand also you wanted to show us, it's a new tool that we have online now that we just launched pretty quietly this week before the official launch of it, but the Technical Center.
Yes, And I'll just share my screen here,
Okay.
and we'll look at the Fenestration Canada website. If you tuned in yesterday, you might have noticed that there is now a link here to something called the Technical Center. So it's right on the top toolbar of the Fenestration Canada website. And we've created a portal to kind of be a single portal for all technical issues related to our membership. So the Technical Center collects the Tech Talks show, and it also assembles with links to a number of the other technical resources on our website. You've got the performance calculator. You can link to it right from the Tech Center. All the documents that we've ever published, whether they're presentations that were given at conferences, whether they're our code change, whether they are our code change responses. So they are listed here by year. So it's now easy to browse the various documents and technical resources we've had. Things like the COVID response plan, basically everything you want to access from our library of documents is available here on the Technical Center. And we also have information about the installer certification program. One of the things that we haven't really had a lot of content on NAFs in the form of articles. And for a number of years while I are at RDH, I had written articles on the NAFs in Canada blog. Yeah. And I'm sure some of our members are aware of that, but some may not be. And so on the NAFs in Canada blog, which is hosted on the RDH website, there are a series of articles written over a period of about 4 or 5 years that cover a lot of issues. And I think they're still a worthy read today. This one on an architect's guide to NAFs, this blog post introduces to an ebook, which I wrote to basically help architects and specifiers understand the role of the NAF standard in the code. And inside that ebook, which you, of course, if you go to that blog post, you can have access to download a copy of it. It's like an ebook PDF. It's like an all-in-one resource to NAFs, not so much from the manufacturer testing side, but there's information about the different versions of NAFs, about performance classes, performance grades, and it's actually trying to help the specifiers and architects understand how NAFs works in the real world and not just how they think it works. So for those of you who are selling to the architectural market, that's a really good resource to help you with facts and information that would be helpful when you're dealing with that group. Wind speed up over hills. This is a really good post that I'm proud of, in the sense that the Canadian supplement to NAFs and the Fenestration Canada calculator, if you read the fine print, it only applies to products on level ground. And it says if the slope is 10% or more, you got to worry about wind speed up. Well, you know, building officials have asked the question, hey, I've got a house with a 200-foot driveway and the slope is 12%. Do I need to worry about wind speed up over hills? You know, at what point do you worry about it? Does it a factor when you're at the bottom of the hill? Is it a factor when you're at the top of the hill? So this is something that we just have no documentation on in Canada. And this blog post deals with some resources that will answer those questions. So I encourage you to have a look at it at some point. So there's a lot of topics that are covered here: the alternative to NAFs testing for Part 9 buildings, the differences between NAFs 8 and 11, Canadian supplement and water testing and water test failure. So there are topics related to NAFs. There's about 20 articles there, and I think it's good for our members to know these are available. They will all add to your knowledge of the subject. There's also, if you want to contact me, you can just click this link and it'll set up an email. So again, members can have direct access to me by email very easily that way. We also have technical news here. Um, Past issues of Tech Talks are all going to be here in this window on the right. So, and then a compendium of other things, articles, media interviews where we've been interviewed, press releases, and so on. So anything to do with technical aspects of Windows, this is the portal on our website. And I think it's great to have this information now collected in a more user-friendly way for our members. And all credit to this goes to Stefan. He's the whiz who put it all together, but I think it's a great resource. Thank you, Stefan.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's nothing if there's no content, right? So it's not. I won't take credit for all that, but it's. I think we just want it to be kind of easier for membership, and like, let's face it, we have a lot of non-members too that use this our resources and now they're going to use this portal, and all for the best if we can display information as easily as possible. And this is all about also interacting with you guys, with the members. That's why we have a direct link there to contact Al, and it's gonna just grow bigger over the next few weeks even. So just keep an eye on it. Right now, if I'm looking at the poll, let me just take a quick look here. So I would say that, well, right now we have 50% of the people who voted that are that have concerns about the energy regulations, and if you add to that whoever had concerns about the market, the fenestration market transformation, we're at like 70% altogether. That's basically towards energy. What does that tell you, Al?
Well, it tells me that there is, significant concern as to how proposed initiatives to improve the energy performance of Windows is going to affect our members' businesses. I think there's concern. What will this mean? What will it cost me? Will there be a market for the products? Like, nobody's asking me for those triple glazed windows today. So, if I start having to be forced to introduce them and there's nobody to buy them, that's just not going to work. So I think there are those kinds of concerns, but I think it would be good to hear from members more specifically what things might have concerned them.
Yeah, of
Whether
course.
it's something they've heard at one of the presentations from NRCan, or whether there's other vectors of information that are concerning them, and I think it would be interesting to discuss those today.
Yeah, because what we see now when we look at energy regulations, we're also talking about respective regions, right? It's not only the market transformation in itself. You also have all the regulations that can show up in any regions in Canada. So all that together, it's a lot.
And some folks are, of course, concerned about the energy rating, that the proposed changes that were discussed for the 2020 code, we're going to eliminate an energy rating path, for example, in the tiered code. So as the code goes beyond the base level we're at today to the higher tiers, there's no longer an energy rating path in the proposed change. Now, there was some pushback against that, but and some of the responses opposing it were rather technical in a good way. So we're not sure how that code change will work out in reality, but I know that's another concern that members have, because a number of our members really focus on the energy rating as the preferred way of qualifying their products under Energy Star and under the building code.
So I would like, at this point, if any of those who voted for either energy regulation or market transformation, is there anyone on the call right now that would have something to say about that, or a question that we can address with Al here? So I'll give you
an opinion.
An opinion, yeah. Which, yeah, it would be surprising if no one has
you
one.
can rant too, basically. I think. Anyway, of course, we want to keep things civil, but
yeah. Well, I mean, it would be surprising if no one has an opinion, but at the same time, maybe we fixed it. We don't know. Like, maybe this podcast just fixed it all. So that's what it looks like. We don't have a question about it. So no open questions on the Q&A. Oh, we have someone. We have Joe here, Joe Aiden. So I'll patch him with us.
Hi, Stefan. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Joe.
Hi.
You're on the line with Al too.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Al. Yeah, I expect what I'm going to say is somewhat the obvious with regard to the market transformation, but I think a lot of us just feel that the 2030 objective of a 0.8 U factor is just simply not realistic. And we've made the point a number of times, and when I've seen, the folks at Intercan just don't seem to want to listen to the comments. There seems to be kind of a talk to the hand mentality that, no, we think it's okay, so just suck it up and deal with it. Hate to be so blunt, but that's kind of how I've seen it. So, and again, that's not so much something you can address or handle here, but it's just, I guess, if you want to comment, I'll just put that comment out that we just don't seem to be getting any traction with our concerns about that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, Al, maybe you can take this one.
Sure. Well, back in February, Stefan and I had a visit with Natural Resources Canada Equipment Division in Ottawa. And these are the folks whose job it is to try and put into effect that market transformation program and further consultations with industry. And, it was a good meeting, and we did feel that they were listening to what we had to say. And I told them the way it looked from my perspective, and this is what I tell everyone that I talk to about this subject is, 2030 is 10 years away. Whatever, you can't ask for a higher level of performance 10 years from now than we can achieve today with the actual technologies that are widely available in the marketplace coast to coast. So from my point of view, there isn't enough time to introduce and commercialize a new technology at a wide scale in the next 10 years that will somehow, help that process. There might be some limited use of new technologies, but I just don't see that being the case. So to my mind, what's the best thing we can do today? Today from coast to coast, we have access pretty much, maybe with some exceptions in some outpost regions, but we have access to triple glazed glass. We have access to great Lowy coatings, warm spacers, and argon fill. So to my mind, the 2030 goal has to be based on what's the best windows we can build with that kind of glass and with a highly insulated frame, whether it's a PVC frame, a fiberglass frame, or some kind of hybrid thermally broken frame with a large thermal breaks. These are the technologies we have today. So to my mind, looking at it from that point of view, I think that they're going to have to adjust their target to what's achievable, and it'll probably come down to a metric U value of around 1 or maybe 0.9. Jeff Baker has pointed out that if you take a European passive house window that is rated in Europe at 0.8, when you evaluate that same window under NFRC conditions, which are the same as CSA conditions, the performance isn't as good, and a 0.8 becomes a 0.9 or a little bit higher. And the reason for that is in Europe, they evaluate at a 0 degree outdoor temperature. So the temperature differential between indoor and outdoor is about 20 degrees. In the NFRC CSA system, that temperature differential is around 40 degrees. And so the bigger the temperature differential from inside to outside, the faster the rate of heat flow through the product. And so when you evaluate even that German passive house window at 0.8 under NFRC conditions, you find that it performs around the 0.9, right? So I think somewhere around that 0.9 or 1 is where it's going to end up. And I think 1 would be a nice round number that just would make things simpler. And that's a product that it's possible to build today with the technologies we have today.
So
now,
that's your thought.
This is my thought, right?
Okay.
This is my opinion. And this is the opinion I shared with Natural Resources Canada. And I think they were listening very attentively at that point. So we definitely want them to be realistic in terms of what their ultimate goal will be. And so I personally think that no matter what they say, I don't think they're going to be able to get anything better than that. And I think if they can accept that, then I think it helps, know if we knew that, then it would give our industry some comfort in saying, okay, yeah, we know what that involves now. Now it's potentially an achievable target. The next question is when, because when is there going to be a market for that product? In 2030, or will that market appear sooner?
I would be interested to know what Joe, what you think about Al just mentioned, and if anyone else on the line has opinion about that. I would be interested to know, like, because as we said, this is Al's opinion. Like, is it an opinion that you guys share?
Yeah, thanks, Stefan. Yeah, I appreciate the comments, Al. I think probably the part about it that I appreciate the most is that they did seem to listen to what you had to say. Again, that's kind of been my frustration from the beginning, is it seems like we would make these comments at FinCam meetings or whatnot, and the response would just pretty much, go away and leave me alone. And I didn't really seem to appreciate what we were trying to tell them. So if they were indeed listening to and understanding what you were telling them, that's encouraging. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, and I can vouch for that. I was there, and even on top of that, it's not just come and meet with us. And at this point in time, like, I reached out to them and I said, what if we go and meet you? And they opened their calendar and met with us, and they basically always do that whenever we reach out. So to that point, and I understand, Joe, what you're saying, because that's how it looked like. And I mean, we'll take part of the blame here, because how do we, maybe we did not like reflect that to our membership, this kind of open communication we've had with them in the past year, for sure, in the past few months even more. But yes, we do have a really good relationship with them. That being said, we don't control the whole agenda. But if there's one thing that I can tell you, my feeling is that they're genuinely interested and they're listening to us. And that was the same feeling, Al, that you had, right?
Yes, I think they don't want to introduce a program that's going to fail. They don't want to they don't want to be embarrassed at the outcome, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it should be, and so I think they are very much going to be inclined to be very practical about it. And one of the reasons that we haven't heard much from them in the past year is probably due to the fact that that's what they want to do. They want to actually be careful to take steps that are going to be realistic, achievable, and ultimately successful, rather than rushing through with some kind of a program that's too ambitious and that's just going to fail. So I think there's a basis there for continued dialogue, and I'm fairly hopeful that the end result is going to be something practical and achievable.
Yeah.
Okay. So, thanks much.
Thanks, Joe, for your comment here and your participation. We have Alan now that wants to join us. Just give me a second here. Here you go. And we're going to have Alan here. So Alan, you're on the line with Al and myself.
Okay, guys, thanks very much. Yeah, I listened to Al's comments, and I really believe that is a very real view, a real life view, and a view that I think most of us could get behind, and especially manufacturers. What we see, I mean, the fact is that most of the windows that we manufacture, today in our market, are manufactured to meet a 1.6 U value or an ER rating of 25. So if we just stick with the fact that most of them are somewhere in the 1.6 to 1.7 range, they're meeting by the ER number mostly. But if we drop down to a U value of 1.0, and I'm not sure if it's actually a linear curve that we're following here, but that's about over a 40 that's about a 40% reduction in the overall heat loss that's happening through the window, and that is probably one of the most significant reduction. That's a huge reduction in terms of what's happening in the home today. And I mean, how many additional inches of insulation would you have to add to your walls in order to achieve that type of reduction? So I really think that we're Al's comments are on a path that I think most of our industry could get behind. I mean, a lot of us today see that it's realistic to achieve that Energy Star most efficient target, which is, I think it's like 1.05 right now. So most of us have products that can hit that. And if it was just simply left to a number around 1.0 U value for 2030, I think a lot of the panic would come out of what we see today, because a lot of us are starting to look at things that are coming up is how do we get there, and you're starting to look at fin triples and quads, and more use of more exotic gases, more krypton, which is very, very expensive. I guess my point is that when we go to those areas, there are a lot more uncertainties seem to be there. Most of us have the technology that we can get behind hitting a U value of around 1.0, but going beyond that seems to be the challenge that most of us, if you can't see how to get there, it's very, very difficult to get behind the plan. So I agree with Al's view of this here. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents in.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Al, did you have any follow-up comment on that?
Yeah, no, thanks, Al. I think that's exactly right. I mean, I come from a manufacturer's environment as well. I used to work for Initech Windows and Doors, and some of the discussions that NRCan had started with a couple of years ago really frustrated me, because it seemed to me that they were trying to design like a moon launch product. Something that required extraordinary R&D and innovation and development and new technology and whatnot. And really, from my view all along has been that let's get realistic, guys. We have to work within what's achievable in that 10-year time frame, and that's what it's the tools we have today that's going to have to do it.
And it seemed to,
yeah, go on.
It seemed to me that actually they forgot about the moon and they aimed right for Mars. That's what it's
There you go. Yes. So it's only a moonshot. We're not going to Mars yet. Yeah. So I mean, that's what I think. And frankly, I can't see anyone trying to implement anything more radical than that, because I just don't think anything else is achievable. But that is achievable. And we already have manufacturers who are designing an Energy Star most efficient product. And, if you round 1.05 to 1 decimal, or one, you're right in that zone, right? And where will the final number be? We don't know. But, at that point, the difference between 1.5 and 1.0 is insignificantly small. And at the scale of a home, it's not going to have any impact. So, it's quite possible, and I'm just speculating here, but it's quite possible that the Energy Star most efficient may end up being that target, So, but I think it's encouraging to know that, yes, there are products already today. I think most Canadian manufacturers could see an achievable path to get there. And then the next question is, will there be a market for that product? And I think that's where the tiered code approach, the step code approach, is actually going to be beneficial, because I believe the intent of it is to start creating a market for those energy efficient products at a small scale that's going to grow over time, so that manufacturers aren't forced to introduce product lines they can't sell. Instead, the purpose of the regulation, not so much the energy regulations, but the purpose of the code will be to try and create demand that will be limited initially. And initially it'll be the people with Energy Star most efficient type products that'll get that work. But over time, that demand will grow. And I had a really interesting conversation a couple of weeks ago with a fella in British Columbia who's developed a software package, a cloud-based platform that can do tens of thousands of Hot 2000 runs in a very short time. And the purpose of that is to help builders pick the most economical path to a higher tier of energy performance. So instead of coming with a set of plans and some product ideas to an energy advisor, have him work for a day and to give you a report saying, nope, that didn't work. What do you want to do now? Let's try more roof insulation. Let's try this, let's try that. The idea is that you could take your house design, rough up the model in simple bulk, high level parameters, and have the thing spit out for you in somewhere maybe an hour or several hours, the top 10 most cost-effective ways to get there. And so that's what he's doing to help builders under the STEP code in British Columbia. And there's now 4 municipalities that recognize the use of that software to help builders. And one of the things he's finding is that often the most effective thing a builder can do is just what Alan said: put in better windows. If you put in a window that's got 40% less heat loss, and the window is actually the highest heat loss component of the entire house, you can actually, it's worth spending more money for that better window because you save multiples of that instead of putting insulation, more insulation in the roof, more insulation in your walls. Instead of spending a lot of money applying more insulation to the bulk of the enclosure, if you focus to that 15-20% of the enclosure that's windows and spend your money there, you get much more bang for your buck. And I think I think that kind of, as builders discover that, it's going to increase the demand for these higher performing windows. In fact, Stefan, I haven't mentioned this to you yet, but I've asked him if he'd be willing to share on one of our podcasts a case study. He was involved in a building where he did exactly that. He helped a builder to save money on the cost of the house by putting in better windows. And I think that's something that, you know,
I mean, it's going to be one way to kind of stimulate the market for better windows. Like if we have to get to that point, which we probably will, we'll also have to find ways to make sure that there's demand for the product. So that's one of the ways we do that.
And potentially, if we can get some research or some facts on how windows help builders, that can actually help in the sales process. That you're asking me for my middle of the road window, but did you know that if you use my top of the line window, have the energy modeler run the analysis with the best window and see if that doesn't help in your overall cost, kind of a thing. So potentially this could be even a good news story in terms of helping us to sell those higher performing products that we make that currently there might be a limited market for. But I think under these progressive, when I say progressively more stringent codes, we'll probably see a demand for these products, and that will help us to introduce them on a timetable that works for us as manufacturers, instead of a timetable that's imposed on us by regulators.
So, Alan, I understand you also had a question about ER or calculation of ER. Would you want to ask it directly?
Yeah, sure. This way I can phrase it properly. So in calculating, in looking at ER and the calculation, and it's always been the problem where ER only seems to look at the heating loads and it doesn't look at the cooling loads. And more we're seeing, people that they actually have heat pumps now that run all year long. They're running in the winter to warm the house, and they're running in the summer to cool the house. So, we're not. They say we live in a heating climate. Well, for 3 to 4 months of the year, we're actually in a cooling climate as well. And I'm just wondering if
I think we lost Alan.
Yeah, sounds
Yeah,
like he
okay.
was in. Huh?
Is he back? No. Okay, we'll give him a little time to come back. I have the question here, though. The question was, do you see a cooling component being added to calculate ER?
I don't know that anyone is looking to change the calculation of ER. I think they're probably dealing with the need to address cooling by requiring these whole building energy models under the performance path in the code. Even today in the code, in 936, there is a performance path, which allows you to have a higher window to wall ratio and other things that don't fit the prescriptive path. But if you can make the whole building work on the basis of the energy model, you're good to go. So we have this performance path, and that's where they should be taking account of the cooling loads and the effect of those loads on the building. So those models are orientation specific, and so they take the geometry of the house. They've got the windows situated at their actual sizes on the different elevations, and they're trying to do this energy model that's a year-round energy model with that. So so I think that's how they're handling the impact on cooling. The reason it hasn't been in the ER is that, NRCan's studies, and even the study that RDH did a few years back in 2014, I think, where in that study, we did a complete relook of the energy rating, and we asked the question, is it still relevant in Canada? And the answer was, it is, provided your window to wall ratio is not too high, provided your windows are more or less evenly distributed around the building, provided they don't all face the same direction, provided that you take measures to prevent overheating discomfort from excessive solar heat gain. With those provisions, the energy rating works very well for selecting windows. But even in that RDH study, which was done in 2014, the extra cooling loads were offset by the savings in heating. So if you looked at the performance of a house under the ER, provided it's the right kind of house that the windows are used in, yes, there are cooling loads, but the savings in heat energy are an order of magnitude greater than how much you're paying for the cooling when you need the cooling. So the studies have showed that you don't really have to worry about those extra cooling loads in the big scheme of things. Whether that will still be the case, here's the thing though, that was provided that your window to wall ratios were reasonable, that
Okay.
they didn't face all one way. And we are having situations where people are using energy rating to select windows in a townhouse development where the windows are facing front and back, and so if all your windows, if your biggest windows are facing south, and some windows facing north, and you have chosen windows on the basis of energy rating with a high solar heat gain, the people in those townhouses are going to cook. So that's an inappropriate use of the energy rating, right? The energy rating was meant for single family homes and the kind of a housing archetype that we had until the 1980s, 1990s. Most of the new homes built today are custom homes. They have high window to wall ratios, and the energy rating is just not appropriate for those kinds of homes because they fall outside the boundaries where where the energy rating works, and they tend to result in higher cooling loads and higher occupant discomfort. So, but back to the question about cooling, the cooling was addressed in the studies, not on a particular house basis, but in general. It just seemed that the cooling loads were much smaller than the savings from the passive solar heat gain.
Okay. So Alan, I think you're back. I hope you're back. Were you able to hear
Yes.
the answer, and does it answer your question?
Yeah, yes, it does. Thanks very much.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I think that's it. We don't have any more questions at this point, so we could do a little bit on the survey responses here. So the question was, with respect to the technical challenges facing our industry, which one concerns you the most for the coming year? So we had 12% answer proposed code changes. 41% said proposed energy regulations. We had 35% mentioned the fenestration market transformation, 6% installation, and there's another 6% that has no concern at all. So I don't know what it tells you, Al. If we looked at in retrospect now, do you have any comments on that?
Well, like you said, we still have the majority of concerns related to energy in
yeah.
terms of, market transformation or regulation, and some concern about the proposed code changes, which might have been energy related too, right? Our question wasn't clear whether it was the energy provisions. Of course, in this most recent round of public review, the focus was on energy. So I think
Okay.
Clearly the majority of the concerns have been around the energy area. And so I think this is an area that, yes, is the number one concern that manufacturers have been having in this area. Hopefully the things we've talked about today may actually help to allay those concerns somewhat.
Okay.
But there might be more specific issues that we haven't touched upon in this conversation that I'd like to just invite those on the call. If you would like us to deal with some aspect of, code related or market transformation related energy concerns, feel free to drop us a line. You can use that link on the Tech Talks to email me or get in touch with Stephen with specific questions you have. It may actually help us to appreciate specific questions concerns you have, such as dealing with energy advisors. I actually had a very, well, I would almost say disturbing conversation with one of our members about a week ago about what they've been finding in dealing with energy advisors. So under these tiered codes, the energy advisor is running a HOT 2000 model, and that's, the energy advisor's report is required in some jurisdictions to get a building permit.
Yeah.
So that you are actually applying for a house that has been designed to achieve the energy target. But some of these energy advisors don't really know Windows very well, and they're making very inappropriate choices. For example, I mentioned this townhouse complex. This came out of that conversation where the energy advisor figured, hey, if I just keep raising the solar heat gain on the windows, the numbers get better and better in my energy model. But the building is entirely the wrong kind of building where you don't, for a solar heat gain.
Okay.
All the windows facing mainly south,
Okay.
and having high solar gain windows, that's great for saving energy. But what are you going to do about overheating? You need to then provide solar shading. How are you going to provide shading in the summertime, right? That solar heat gain may be great in the winter, but it's not going to be great the rest of the year. And if you're not designing the building to manage other aspects such as comfort, you're going to have a very unhappy customer in the end. So I think there's a need here for energy advisors to be better educated about.
Yeah, I think it's on us too, right? It's on us too. Like, we
Exactly.
need to educate them. We need to reach out to them, which we started doing, by the way. So there's stuff happening right now to have better communications between the two industries here, if you will. But yeah, no, I think you have a fair point. But I also think, as I said, that the education part falls like it's more of it's our job to do, right? It's ours to it's our job to educate anyone really in the construction industry about windows, because that's what we know.
And so I think that's, this is something that I was going to be talking to you about and looking into more deeply. Basically, the stuff I heard with that member on that call, I've highlighted that. We got to follow up on
Yes.
that.
Okay.
And we have to follow up on making sure that energy advisors don't give windows a bad name when they make bad choices about windows just because they don't understand them. So I think that's something we should tackle.
Great. Noted, and we'll keep discussing that for sure. And that's probably a topic for a future tech talk, because I think our members here on the call will have stuff to say about that, and maybe personal opinions and personal experiences too.
And personal experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that closes the show for today. We had a pretty good show again, and a couple questions here. So I just want to thank again Quanex as our sponsor today. So a lot of support from Quanex. Thanks again. You'll find this podcast version. The podcast version of this show is going to be posted sometime next week on the technical center. So for those who are on the call right now and feel that other people should know about this, don't hesitate to send them the link as soon as it's up. And we hope to see you again next week on this show, and have you call in. And we'll try to send the question of the day in advance next time if possible. So maybe you guys get prepared. Thanks again. Thanks, Al. I think it was a pretty good show, and talk to you next week.
Thanks, everyone, and see you next week.